Hello, NASCAR fans. Welcome to this week's Oh, there we go again.
Boy, you have the shortest attention span of just about anybody I know.
It's time to fasten your seatbelt and rev up that engine. It's time to go on Pit Row.
Start over again?
On Pit Row is your weekly look inside the world of NASCAR. Now live, here's the pit crew, Steve Ronkowitz and Charlie Turner.
Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go on Pit Row, boys.
Now it's your turn.
You really need to have like this quiet on the set thing or something. I'm sorry about that, you guys. I'm so excited about doing this show with you every week. I just can't keep my mouth shut. But anyway, let me start this all over again. I'm Charlie Turner, by the way. I'm the dumbass on the left.
That doesn't play quite as well anymore.
No, it doesn't. I'm the one who introed the show. Anyway, welcome this week to our live NASCAR Hangout on Pit Row. I am Charlie Turner, the dumb one, joined by my more professional associates, Steve Ronkowitz over there. Hey, Steve-O.
Hey, how you doing? Actually, you are on the left. If you look at the bottom of the screen, at least on my screen, you are
I'm
on
the right on my screen, so if I say Dick on the left, it would be you.
Then nobody would actually figure out who's where. So
that's true. Right now it would be the jerk in the center, but anyway, Dan's on the far left. Hey, Dan Beaver.
And I'm the amateur of the group, so.
And you're the one that has you're one of the two that has not screwed up yet today. Okay, so anyway, now that all that silliness is out of the way, welcome to. Okay, somebody has to volunteer to read this Brickyard race title. Dan had it earlier today because it's going to be the last time I ever refer to it in the rest of my commentary career.
You mean the Crown Royal John Wayne Walding 400 at the Brickyard by BigMachineRecords.com?
That's the one. Why would anybody in media ever acknowledge the name of that race? That totally defeats the purpose of whatever they're trying to do by giving naming rights to things. That's just ludicrous.
Yeah, it's a Brickyard.
I think they want a banner that'll go the entire length of the front stretch.
They could wrap it around the racetrack.
To it.
Yeah, wrap it around the racetrack. Anyway, well, nothing against our friends at Crown Royal, but that to me that's just kind of silly. So we're going to call it the Brickyard 400 this week, and again with one of the other iconic races in NASCAR these last 2 years, the Mud Summer Classic is this week as well, which I just love that.
So that's the exact opposite. That's one of the best names for a race, official or unofficial, that there is.
Yep, Mud Summer Classic. Of course, they'll probably screw that up before 2 or 3 years get, and they'll be brought to you by John Deere or something. But give Tony a year or two to enjoy the purity of the sport there. So before we get into what's coming up this week and weekend, this past weekend there was a standalone, at least for NASCAR, a standalone Nationwide Series race at Chicagoland Speedway, and I don't remember the name of that race either. Sorry. But,
Enjoy Illinois 300.
That's right.
EnjoyIllinois.com 300, I think.
Yeah, there were displays of Illinois destinations all over the racetrack. It was actually pretty cool, and the race was a good one. I thought it started late. They made it a night race, which I'll quickly segue to that subject. I don't know why they did that. They have run the standalone race as a normal Saturday afternoon nationwide race for the years we've been going to it, and always seem to have pretty good crowds for nationwide standalones. I thought the grandstands were usually maybe 3/4 full. They moved it to a night race this year and made a big deal about it. There were T-shirts around, night under the race under the lights or something like that, and there was nobody there. I mean, the crowd was sparse. I think ARCA ran the race right immediately before the Nationwide Series race. I think ARCA started at 5:30. And the Nationwide Series race started at about 7:30 Chicago time, but man, and there was nobody there. It was really. I'm sure they had to be very disappointed in that turnout. So what I'm leading to with this big long prologue is NASCAR really a night race event, or should they be in the afternoon?
You know, honestly, I don't know the answer to that 100%, but my reaction is I couldn't tell you beforehand whether it was a night race or a day race. You know, without actually going and looking and trying to figure out, you know, there was not enough build-up, I don't think, at least fan-wise, for me to know.
Steve,
now, maybe they...
Steve, I'll go even farther than that. We've been planning to go to this race since last year, all right? I didn't know it was a night race until Saturday.
Well, that's pretty sad.
I tell you, Friday. I'm thinking the race was Sunday. We didn't know it was a night race until Friday. And I'm like hooked. So they have a 7:30 start to the race. You still had to be there at 9 o'clock for the photographers meeting. So it didn't change anything as far as travel plans much. It was brutal. There was really no media there. It was
And there was nothing else going on. I mean, of any significance in that part of the world.
No, there was an IndyCar race up in Toronto that was getting rained out, and that was it.
Yeah, that was about it. Unless, and I don't think the Cubs were there, and I don't know about the White Sox. And you know whether that would made a difference or not, probably not.
No, I don't know. But it was. I think they made a mistake. I wonder if it'll be interesting to see if they go back to an afternoon start next year because this didn't work out.
Yeah,
I think there needs to be a balance. I like night races, but I don't. I like the day races too, and there are different skills required to race with the great grip versus the slick tracks. So I think it's nice to have a balance of some day, some night, but it does take away from the specialness of things like the Bristol night race that always was in August.
Right.
With half the races or quarter of the races now being run under the lights.
Yeah, there's nothing. Isn't there an old saying about there's a sure way to ruin a good idea is to copy it? And that's kind of what's happened.
I mean, the other question that you have to ask about the proximity of this race to Indianapolis coming up next week. If you have money to spend and not, you know, huge amounts of money, and you're going to go to a race, chances are you're going to have to make a choice of where you're going to go, and you wouldn't necessarily, unless you're from Wisconsin or Minneapolis or someplace like that where it's a lot closer to go to Chicago than it is to go to Indianapolis, I have to believe that, you know, if you only have X amount of dollars, you're going to not necessarily pick Chicagoland this week to go there when you can go to Indianapolis next week.
Yeah, and Indianapolis now you get more than just a Sprint Cup race at Indianapolis now. You get Nationwide and Sprint Cup. So.
Mm-hmm. And you have to drive back and forth to O'Reilly Raceway Park or whatever it's named now. But I missed that race, by the way. That short track race at O'Reilly Indianapolis Raceway Park. That was a cool event.
It was, and it's just one fewer, short track on the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the best races of the year in the Nationwide Series. That was by far one of the best races of the year.
It was hard to pass, tight corners. You really had to know what you were doing to get underneath somebody, and that's just not that way on big tracks. You don't have that same just threading a needle for every lap on the big tracks. So.
And we kind of beat this to death, I think, a year ago. But what is special now about the Nationwide Series running at Indianapolis Motor Speedway? Nothing.
It's not. They needed to run it. They needed to run it on the road course, or not do it at all.
Right. It was special at IRP. It was a special deal at IRP, and it is just another undercard race now at the Speedway. I think it's just crazy. Because who cares?
I think I have to agree. which I kind of hate to do sometimes, but.
We're not allowed to agree on this show. I mean, that's against the rules, so I'm throwing the flag out here. All right, well, enough of that. So Chicagoland was interesting. Chase Elliott won the race in dominating fashion. There really were no full-time Cup drivers there at all. Steve, you would have loved it, unless you count Kyle Larson. I guess you have to count Kyle Larson as a full-time Cup driver, but he hasn't run a full season of Cup at this point. So.
So he's eligible under my rules.
There you go. Yeah.
The question now is, that seems to be getting a little bit of traction about Chase Elliott. If Chase Elliott wins this championship in his first year in Nationwide, the plan was for him to run Nationwide full-time again next year. Do you think that will change, or is there going to be pressure to find a ride for him in the Cup Series for next year?
Oh, I think there's probably already pressure being felt to find him a ride, don't you? He's just too talented. He's got that it factor, that stars have. And there's this budding, to me, I envision this budding rivalry in the Cup Series between him and Kyle Larson and Trevor Bayne and the Dillon boys. I mean, they're all that same age, and they're all good, and they're all going to be in good equipment next year. Or if Chase gets in, that really could create a Young Guns thing. Remember when they did the old Gillette Young Guns thing 10 years ago, when those guys actually were Young Guns?
That's right.
They could actually redo it again now.
Yeah, but that's the crux of the matter is there isn't a place for Elliott right now, unless Hendrick gets around the rules some way and does it better than Richard Childress or Michael Waltrip Racing with their AB cars for the 33 and 66. Or unless they can talk Casey Kane into getting not going through his last year of his contract, there's no place for him in a good car. So do you do a deal for him just to get him in the Cup Series for the full season, but it's in second-class equipment, or do you wait another year? And I hope they wait another year. And I'm guessing that the plan might be for him to take over the number 5 when Kane gets out.
Well, you guys are all forgetting one very important thing.
They couldn't have just started thinking about this week. They've had to have had this in mind, and Hendrick just signed Casey to that extension less than a month ago. That was announced at Michigan.
Well, no, the sponsor re-upped, I believe.
That's right, re-upped, but re-upped in line with his contract. That's right. I'm sorry, my bad.
Right. So that still runs out, I believe, at the end of 2015. So far as I know, that ride's still open at the beginning of 2016, and that's when I'm guessing that they intended to bring Elliott up. But he's got to get some Cup experience. I'm surprised that he's not in a Cup race later on this year, that hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah, I think he's
4 or 5 next year.
I think he's not in a Cup car just because of his age. I believe he's still in high school, if I remember. I think he's only 17.
He's 18, and he graduated.
Oh, he turned 18? Okay. Well, the easy solution to this is that Jeff Gordon's going to win the championship, and he said he would retire. So all you do is you peel that number 2 off, and you slap a 9 right up in front, and you got your 94, and everything is good, and life is move on. That's exactly the way it's going to play out.
Okay, we've got that on. Google has that in perpetuity.
Yeah, Jeffy will win it all. Please win it all and go away.
You're breaking Dan's heart over there.
Yeah, I know I am. Sorry, Dan.
I have no strong affinity to any driver that I haven't handicapped to win. So that's my favorite driver, whoever I pick to win this week.
Okay, so we're going to the Brickyard. We'll talk more specifically about the Brickyard because Dan's going to have his fantasy advice towards the end of our show. But let's talk a little bit about this trip down to the dirt track at Eldora Speedway in Rossburg, Ohio. I used to know of a Rossburg Raceway at one time, but I think it's in deconstruction at the moment.
It's in storage.
Storage. Is there any bigger story in the truck series, even though this race is sort of a minor thing, than the Eldora truck race? Did they catch lightning in a bottle, and is it one of those things that they'll start copying somewhere and ruin the whole aesthetic of it?
I don't think you could ruin the whole aesthetic of it. If trucks ran half of their season on dirt, I'd be ecstatic. So long as it's the right dirt tracks that could handle the weight of the trucks and could handle the size of the field. I think it's it's a connection to NASCAR's roots. I think it's important for the history of the sport. I think it alerts the newer fans to what used to be. I don't think there's any negative whatsoever in running dirt track races. I'd like to see the nationwide cars do it on a mile track like DuQuoin or Syracuse. I'd like to see the Cup cars do it, but I know, that's not going to happen in my lifetime. So
the problem with those mile dirt tracks is the ones you mentioned, DuQuoin and Springfield, the 2 fairground tracks, where those are mile tracks. I don't know where else there's mile dirt. I'm sure there's probably several. Okay, they don't have safer barriers, and they're not going to have the money to do it. You can get away with it at that half mile at Eldora. There was a big article some months back about how NASCAR came in with their safety people and some people from the University of Nebraska and inspected Eldora and measured it, and they had them make a few changes to some of the entries and exits to the pits and stuff, but they gave them blessing that they were okay without safer barriers. But the speeds on a half-mile track are a lot different than they are on a mile track, and I just don't see that happening. I mean, I would love to see it happen, but I don't think they'll let it happen.
Well, there are potentially other options, like the foam barriers, which are just a recipe for disaster when someone actually hits them.
Right.
But they are energy absorbing, and they might be able to get around it at that point. Some of those big foam blocks that we saw for years. But regardless of what it costs to do it, I just think it'd be good for the sport to see nationwide cars on dirt as well.
Yep, me too.
Since it's not going to happen, we're just pipe dreaming anyway. So,
researching an article for the On-Pit Road magazine about the truck series and about short tracks, and I had not realized. Went back to the beginning of the truck series, and that first year there were 20 races. 2 of them on Phoenix, the mile track. Those were the only races that were anything that wasn't a short track. I mean, they did run Richmond, which is a 3/4, as you guys know, but the other 17 races were all on half miles or shorter, I think. And that started changing the next year. I mean, it's like NASCAR just doesn't like short tracks.
Yeah, one of the best races of that first season was probably Saugus. A 1/4 mile track, or not much bigger than a 1/4 mile track, and they were just banging on each other. I think Kenny Schrader won the race that year and got knocked around. He intentionally spun somebody in retaliation, got sent to the back of the pack, and then had to come storming through it. And that was probably one of the best races in Truck Series history.
Yep. Yeah, I remember those. When that was on. What was the show that carried those back then? Because they didn't have I can't remember.
I think ESPN had most of them. They may have named it something a little different, but
I think they did. I think it was a branded show or something. I don't know, but yeah, it was good stuff. But they ran at the end of that first season. They ran. I don't know if you guys remember. They ran an exhibition race at Homestead that they called the Super Truck 25 or something like that. And just to test and see how the trucks would do on 1.5-mile tracks. And the next year they had, I think, 6 races on tracks over a mile, besides the Phoenix races.
I think the original thought process was that they would not be able to handle anything bigger than a 1-mile track, just because the aerodynamic package was not going to be sufficient for them to stay on the racetrack.
The aero package is better than it is on the cars.
Yeah, exactly. Better racing.
It's better racing because the thing about those trucks is that they lose it, they get loose, and they start to slide, and that big slab-sided side of the car catches them back up, straightens them back up, and they go. They can wreck and run like 3 times a lap and never hit anything.
Yeah,
it's the beauty of those events. That's why they're so much fun to watch. So there's that reason to have them on the bigger tracks, because they go faster and they can slide them around there. But I'd sure like to see more short tracks. There's 2 Martinsville races this year, one at Bristol, Tony's race, and the one at Iowa. And Iowa's almost not a short track. It's a 3/4 or 7/8 mile track.
7/8, yeah. The only downside I have to say about this race at Eldora is it doesn't appear, and I don't have an entry list in front of me. I don't know if Dan does or not, but last year there were some dirt guys that found rides in this, and I thought it was a little more interesting. I haven't heard that there's guys finding rides that are normally running World of Outlaws and things like that, which is where I think it would be of some interest and some fun.
Yeah, well, last year, Bloomquist was in it last year. He didn't do particularly well, and then you've got some guys with really strong racing roots. The two Blaney's running
right.
the race, Dad and Son, was pretty interesting. Give me 1 second. I'll pull up the entry list here. But
we had somebody on the show last year, Steve, right before the race, and I'm trying to remember who it was. It wasn't Bloomquist. It was Hillenbrandt, maybe?
I don't remember either. But yeah, we did have one of the dirt ringers.
Yeah.
We were trying to come up with a catchy phrase.
Dirt ringers?
Dirt whackers?
The dirt. Oh, that sounds just a little disgusting.
So does dirt ringers, really. But
well, last year we also had Jennifer Joe Cobb's dad racing Joe Cobb, so another dirt track specialist.
I think he's on the entry list for this year.
So she's there, but it could be him that takes over the ride.
Because I thought she entered the 10 and the 0.
10 or the 0 is currently TBA, so you're right. You could be right.
Yeah. Okay.
Other than that, I see some names I don't recognize particularly, but I don't recognize
anybody coming out of the broadcast booth to run this? Like, is Kenny Wallace in a truck this week, or
Kenny Schrader's back? That'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. And
Schrader is, but I do not believe Wallace is.
Okay. Looks like Kenny might have actually hung it up, except for his dirt late model stuff that he does.
Well, he's been fairly adamant on Twitter that he will not search out money for a ride in any of the NASCAR, top 3 NASCAR series anymore, to take money in, and that's what he did for years, and he was sick of it, so he won't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
comes a time.
Don't say that I blame him.
No.
That's got to get old, and then the quality of the rides that you're able to rent or get with that, it's just it's got to be a treadmill.
Oh, absolutely. If you've got an unlimited budget of amount of money that you can bring to the table, that's one thing. If you're scratching to find $60,000, $60,000 doesn't buy you much on a race weekend in the Nationwide Series.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we go much farther in this show, I put up a question this week, since we kind of started off bitching about the way they've changed the Brickyard 400 name, and then lauding the way the Mud Summer Classic is named. I put up on the Facebook page something to kind of spur some comments this week. What are your 4 favorite big races? So not so much tied to names necessarily, but is the Brickyard 400 still one of your top 4? So we've got some bunch of comments about that. It seems to be a popular topic, and we'll pick the best one of those to give our prize out this week. Steve's going to tell you more about the prize.
Well, you can submit your Shell Saver Card comment of the day and take home a $50 Shell gift card. Remember, every time Joey Logano, driver of that 22 Shell Pennzoil Ford Fusion, wins a 2014 points race, Shell Saver Card holders save 22 cents per gallon on any grade of Shell nitrogen-rich gasoline or Shell diesel by using their Shell Saver Card the Wednesday, or if you prefer Wednesday, after the race. Offer valid up to only 25 gallons. Visit shell.us/Wednesday for details. I can't take my big double-sided dually truck in there and fill up both tanks.
No, I didn't know you had one of those. But anyway, our winner last week was Tire Dog. I don't know what Tire Dog's name is, but on Facebook he's known as Tire Dog. He had a very funny comment last week, and one that was somewhat off-color this week, which is not what he won the prize for, but that's okay. Still like those comments. So keep them coming. We'll pick the best one from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the website, one of those this week, and that person will get a $50 gift card from Shell. Thanks to the folks at Shell for that. So before we get into the fantasy stuff here, hey, we're joined by guess what? Beth Ann just joined us. Hey, Beth Ann, what's up? Can you hear us? We can see you. don't think she can hear us yet. Anyway, while we wait for Beth to get hooked up, this Race Team Alliance thing is not going away. There were recent comments, I think, overnight, maybe from yesterday, by Brian France. He's finally weighed in on this. Up till now, it's only been Mike Helton that we've heard from on the NASCAR side. What do you guys think about it? It's not going away, and it appears to be a burr under the saddle of the France family.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, as you say, the first time we've heard anything from Brian France, and he says that he thinks it's, in no such terms, he thinks it's a silly thing, and there's no reason to have one voice. He doesn't think it's going to work. Well, as we said before we went on the air, there has always been one voice. Unfortunately, that voice has only been of NASCAR's. It's never been one voice of the owners or the drivers or anybody else. And I think it just goes to show how Brian France is different than Big Bill France or Bill France Jr. in that either one of those two aforementioned gentlemen would never have put up with this one way or the other. And they would have found a way to squash the whole deal, or it never would have had to have occurred to begin with. And I think Brian France is the reason that the RTA will survive and will thrive.
What do you think, Dan?
Well, I agree with Steve that under the Bill Jr. or Sr., you never would have heard about it. This would have happened in a back room someplace. You probably would have wondered whatever happened to Rob Kaufman. That guy who used to own.
Rob Kaufman sleeps with the fishes.
And that would be that. But
he'd be hanging out with Jeremy Mayfield, most likely.
Him sitting in a bar, drinking whiskey, going, "Damn, I could have been somebody." The organization itself, I just don't know. They've got to come out with a clear purpose. They've got to tell us exactly what it is they want to do. If they want us to be on their side, if they want us to, as fans, to show them some support, we've got to know what they're supposedly going to stand for. If it's just a way to make the big teams even more dominant, most fans aren't going to be for that. And the fact that we don't know anything means that you're going to kind of side with, well, you almost side with NASCAR on it. It's like, what is it they want? What is it that they're going to do? If they can't tell you, then they're not going to be effective, and let's just go on and have business as usual.
Yeah, I mean, if they weren't going to use this as a club to beat NASCAR with, they wouldn't have had to announce it. They could have just had an informal agreement to negotiate contracts to get lower prices on wrenches or whatever, which is the ludicrous thing that they said they were going to, one of the things they were going to do. They don't need an association with all this infrastructure and everything to do that, right? I mean, that's. But that's
the point.
Don't treat us like fools.
But that's the point. They're expecting us to fill in the gaps for things that they just don't want to say, don't have the nerve to say, or think is politically deathly to say. When the drivers' union came along in the PDA, they wanted safety. They wanted to be able to lobby against NASCAR for one thing or the other. When the drivers' union that Curtis Turner and Tim Flock tried to put together, and there were definite, you knew exactly what those organizations wanted, and you could either say, well, I'm a labor person, so I'm for the Teamsters union, or I'm a driver person, so I'm for the PDA. But in this case, it's owners, and we don't know if we're for them or against them. You like one owner or another. You don't like all owners just generally. So what are we supposed to do? Where is that support supposed to come from? And that's the thing that's going to make them, I think, the most likely to be unsuccessful, is that they don't have any kind of clear agenda, and we're left to just speculate. Take the speculation off. Say what they want, and be honest about it. It's not cheaper tools. It's not Groupon. What is it? And then we can take sides.
Yep, I think you hit it right on the head. And we're joined again by Beth. Hopefully she can hear us this time. Beth, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear
Oh,
me?
we hear you just fine. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you missed our segment where we were talking about the weekend at Chicagoland. I think this RTA thing's not going to go away, and we'll have to revisit it as we go along. But I agree with you guys that it's just too ambiguous to even talk about. You know, I can't tell whether I'm for it or against it. I just know it's kind of fun to see NASCAR squirm. So I mean, I don't have a problem with that. As long as it doesn't affect the racing in a negative way, I don't really care, I guess, one way or the other. Beth, what did you think about the Chicago race? I know we both talked about during the day about the sparsity of the crowds, and the guys and I were talking about it earlier. That seemed to me like the move to the night race was a negative move there.
Yeah, it was late. It was late for a race, and I don't know. I can't remember the crowd last year. It seems like there were fewer people this year, though.
Oh, I thought there was definitely a smaller crowd this year.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes we're at two different events at Chicagoland, and the Cup race obviously gets a bigger crowd. Maybe I'm thinking of that, but I just thought it was pretty skinny this past weekend. All right, well, we're at the part of the show where we should probably talk about this little race down in Indianapolis this week. Dan,
is there a race at Indy this week?
There's a race down at Indy this week, and it used to be one of the big four. At least I used to always think it was one of the big four in the Sprint Cup Series. You guys still along with that? Is it one of the big four or not?
It's one of my big four.
Yeah, I still rate it up in the big four. I mean, it doesn't have the panache that I thought it did originally, and again, some of that comes back from the standpoint early on you had guys coming from different series to race in this race because it was Indianapolis. You had guys like A.J. Foyt cramming himself back into a stock car one last time to run at Indianapolis because it was Indianapolis. That has gone away, and I kind of miss that. I think, and likewise in the other direction as well. You know, back when you had guys running the Indy 500 coming from other series, I thought that was pretty cool too. But I miss that part of the whole deal.
Yeah, the days of the 50-car entry lists at the Brickyard 400 are long gone.
Yep.
Oh, remember Al Unser driving Hendrick Motorsports car at Daytona a few years back, and that's what it'd be nice if the Brickyard became. These guys rolling out a backup car and getting some of those Indy regulars in. Juan Pablo Montoya is about all we've got.
Yeah,
and I'm sure he's going to be a player in the fantasy talk this week, I would think, too.
Absolutely.
And there's your segue, Dan. We're leaning into...
That was my segue? Hey, I missed it.
Steve usually has some intro music for you or something, but I thought maybe he would pick up on it. There we go. Oh, I'm glad you cut that short.
Even though we don't have the same kind of the same type of drivers, you're still going to get the biggest entry list, one of the biggest entry lists at Indy, and that provides some opportunities. We've got Montoya coming in. We've got Trevor Bayne running this week. You've got Brett Moffitt, who isn't particularly fantasy relevant, but at least it's a new name. Matt Crafton and a Robbie Benton entry. So we've got some interesting drivers. This doesn't have to be business as usual. At least once you get down to Yahoo's Group C, talking about that game, and in salary cap games, you've got some drivers that are going to be pretty cheap. Otherwise, you treat this race the same way you do other flat track races. Pocono's probably your closest comparative. You've got another 2.5 mile track. One of the corners is based on Indy, so those are the tracks you're looking at. We're coming out of New Hampshire. Indy's the middle race. Then you got Pocono, so you've got 3 flat track races in a row. So you can do some place and hold strategies through here as well, with that caveat that Indy is a marquee event, and there are some drivers that tend to step up, I think, in marquee events. Also, it's not going to look quite the record books aren't going to reflect how closely related these 3 races are because of all the fuel mileage strategies that didn't play out last week. So you're going to look, instead of looking for drivers who finished well, you look for drivers who ran well last week. Denny Hamlin finished in the top 10, but he probably should have finished in the top 5. Jeff Gordon should have finished in the top 5. Kevin Harvick, Joey Logano. So even though they finished down the order, those are drivers that continue to be fantasy relevant and continue to be a good play coming into this race. Then, of course, you got Keselowski and Kyle Busch, who dominated the race. I'm sorry, something strange is happening on my screen. So everybody's gone into circles. There we go. Now I got.
Oh, you're good. You're good on this end.
But that's why I was laughing. So you had Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch, who both finished well and dominated. You had Dale Earnhardt Jr., who finished in the top 10, was also one of the dominant cars. Matt Kenseth finished in the top 10, in the top 5, and was one of the 5 best or 10 best in top 10 laps. So you've got a little bit of the thing. You can't just look at the numbers. You got to go back and remember the circumstances of last week's race. That said, some of that momentum is going to carry over. Take Daytona out of the mix, and you look at the most recent unrestricted speedways, and you've got some of those same cast of characters that bring momentum with them into Indy. So that's what you look for, and I think what you come up with is, in Group A, this should be a good week for Jeff Gordon. He's got 4 Indy wins. The last one, I think, came back in, it was a while back, 2004, maybe. And he hasn't won since, but he's run well most of the time, this past 6 years, 7 years. He's got 6 top 10s in the last 7 races, and 4 of those are top 5s. One's a second place finish, and he should have won the race that was a second place finish. That was a fuel mileage win for Paul Menard, and Gordon had the dominant car that day. Then I think you're going to go with momentum. You're going to go with Kyle Busch, finishing second in the last 2 unrestricted races. He's got a second place finish at Indy back 2 years ago. So he's looking to improve by 1, and I think he could do it. I think the win will come down to those 2 Group A drivers, either Jeff Gordon or Kyle Busch. Down in Group B, you've got some of that same cast of characters. You can't overlook Keselowski. You can't overlook Logano because they were strong on the flat tracks last week. But everybody's going to have them. So I've got Tony Stewart ranked number 1. It's been a while since we've had him up in the top spot, but there was never a better week to take a risk on him for a couple of reasons. Indy's always been a great track for him. He enters with a 5-race top 10 streak, 3 of which are top 5s. Go back a little while. Ways from that, he's got victories in 2005 and 2007. But also that win that he got at Tri-City Motor Speedway in Auburn, Michigan this weekend, I think is going to go a long way to restoring his attitude, to giving him that positive attitude that he needs in the car. And this is a week that he's going to, I would almost say he's a lock for a top 5. Certainly a lock for a top 10, unless something happens. Ryan Newman had the victory last year. Great time for the victory, but it was a bit of a dark horse victory. He had a top 10 the year before. I don't think he's going to be challenging for the win, but I think he's good for a top 10, and that makes him a driver to start in Group B because you can't start Keselowski and Logano every week. Now, down to Group C, I think there's only one thing to do. You got to put Montoya on your race, on your team, and hope that he doesn't wreck or doesn't make a mistake in the pits. He's always been strong here. He had what was a certain victory a couple of years back before he sped on pit road. He's in at least as good equipment and probably better equipment than he was with Chip Ganassi. So I don't think a part-time team can challenge for the win. I'm not sure they can challenge for a top 5, but I think Montoya would be easy to challenge for a top 10. Kyle Larson, though, could be his week to win. You might not want to put him on your team because of allocation management, but when Montoya first came here with Chip Ganassi, he finished second. Larson's path to NASCAR is more traditional one than Montoya's. He knows how to handle a slick car in the corners. He knows how to drive around and look for the right groove. McMurray's won here. Montoya should have won here. one year. So I think Larson could be your dark horse winner if you're willing to take that gamble and willing to go ahead and use up one of those allocations. Your Group C pick's going to come down to either Larson or Montoya.
Okay, there you have it, NASCAR fans. The opinion of the expert, and he's pretty darn good at this stuff. But we're on the spot now. We got to make our picks. We didn't have anybody to pick last week, so there's no pressure. We don't have any embarrassment to deal with this week for a change.
I picked Tony Stewart to win a sprint car race.
You did.
No, I didn't.
Unfortunately, we don't have that on recording. Okay, so I'm going to pick. I'm going to go first this week, and I think this is the week Matt Kenseth gets his win, his pre-chase win. I know he's going to get one, and I think he's going to get it here. Beth Ann, who do you have this week? Who's your pick?
I'm going with Tony Stewart. He's good at this track, and I think he's going to win finally this week.
Dan, who's your pick to win?
I'm rolling the dice. I'm going with the dark horse, Kyle Larson.
I knew somebody would. I really thought it would be Steve. Of course, he could still pick him. I think Larson's going to win, too, before this thing's all over with. This would be a good play. Steve, who you got?
Well, I was going to take Kyle Larson, but I don't want to be a glom-on kind of guy, so I will switch up, and I'll go with my old standby. I figure Keselowski's got a shot again, so we'll go with him.
All right. So we have what do we got? We got a Toyota, we got a Chevy, and a couple of Fords. That's spreading it out pretty good.
Couple of Chevys.
Couple of Chevys. Oh, that's one. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I was thinking Larson was Ford guy. Okay, that's it for this week. Anybody got any final thoughts before we go into the big Brickyard weekend and the Mud Summer Classic week?
No, but the kissing of the brick should be held for the Cup drivers. I think that nationwide drivers should not be allowed to get down there and kiss the bricks.
Should they be able to hug the bricks, or?
I think they should be able to go back to their pit stall.
Did they blow the bricks a kiss?
No, they can blow something.
Just no lip contact. No lip contact.
Yeah.
What do you think, Beth? Where do you weigh in on this? Beth Ann.
Huh? Where do I weigh in on this?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Are you a brick kisser or not?
I mean, anybody. I mean, you could do that to the Nationwide Series, but like anybody who goes out there, like fans or whoever, get pictures of them kissing the bricks. So, you know what I mean? It's like everybody kisses the bricks. So, I mean, for it to be special, I guess you'd have to stop all the fans from doing it too.
Did anybody kiss the bricks before Dale Jarrett did it?
He was the first.
Was he the first?
He was the first. And it was Todd Parrott's?
Todd Parrott,
idea. Yeah.
So it doesn't have a lot of legs, this deal.
I think they should make the Nationwide drivers drink milk.
I kind of like the idea of having them hug the bricks, though. Just
yeah, just give the bricks a big hug.
Okay. Well, I think they should make them milk a cow.
Milk a brick cow.
There you go.
All right, this has devolved even below our normal standards. So we're gonna sign this one out this week. Thanks to my buddies Beth Ann Heisler down in Bowling Green, Ohio, Dan Beaver in Central Texas, the Garden area, the Garden Place, right? 100-degree Garden Place. Steve Ronkowitz out in the City of Trees, and me just sitting here in Old Toledo, Ohio. Thanks. We'll be back next week with another version of our live NASCAR Hangout on Pit Row. Check us out on our Facebook page, on YouTube, on I don't know, wherever we are.
Everywhere.
On pitrow.com.
Omnipresent.
Omnipresent. We're everywhere. All right. Thanks, everybody.
You've just been on Pit Row, and now you're up to speed with the best information about the world of NASCAR. Come back next week and join the pit crew, Steve and Charlie, and go on Pit Row. On Pit Row is a presentation of Bench Racing Productions.
I'm Tony Stewart. You're listening to the fastest 2 hours in radio with Charlie and Steve. You're on Pit Row. Take it from me, don't speed.